Imagine standing in the middle of a Chinese city. Everything looks normal. Cars move through the streets. Trains arrive at stations. Buildings rise into the sky. Millions of people go about their daily lives. But beneath all of it, another world is moving. Water, electricity, gas, sewage, communication cables, subways, highways, and tunnels carrying the infrastructure that keeps the city alive. You can't see most of it. You don't walk past it. And you probably never think about it. But underneath China's cities, the ground is becoming something more than ground. It is becoming infrastructure. And the scale is enormous. China says it already has around 3.9 million kilometers of urban underground pipelines. And between 2026 and 2030, the country plans to build or upgrade another 770,000 kilometers. It also has thousands of kilometers of integrated utility tunnels designed to carry multiple types of infrastructure inside shared underground corridors. These aren't futuristic concepts. They're already being built. And they're becoming a major part of how China plans its cities. But why? Why spend enormous amounts of money building infrastructure that most people will never see? Why put roads underground? Why bury railway lines beneath cities? Why create entire corridors for pipes and cables? And why is China beginning to plan underground space almost like it plans the surface? Because there is a problem every major city eventually faces. The city is running out of space. Look at a modern Chinese megacity from above. Every piece of land already has a job. There are apartment towers, factories, highways, railways, parks, shopping districts, hospitals, schools, and millions of people. Now try to add another highway, another railway, another utility network, another drainage system. Where does it go? You could build outward. But that means consuming more land. You could build upward. But skyscrapers can only solve certain problems. Or, you could build downward. And suddenly the same piece of land can contain multiple layers of infrastructure. The surface can remain a road. Beneath it can be a railway. Below that can be utilities. And deeper still, other infrastructure. The city doesn't have to expand in only 2 dimensions anymore. Can expand vertically, both up and down. This idea is already changing major Chinese cities. In Beijing, a new underground space plan covering 2025 to 2035 divides the underground environment into multiple depth zones. The goal is to coordinate transportation, municipal infrastructure, energy systems, and other underground functions rather than treating each tunnel as an isolated project. And that tells us something important. China isn't simply digging more holes. It is beginning to think of the underground as another layer of the city. But there is a reason this matters beyond saving space. Look at what happens every time a major underground pipe breaks. A road gets opened. Traffic is interrupted. Workers dig. Pipes are repaired. The street is rebuilt. And eventually, someone has to dig it up again. Now imagine putting multiple utility systems into accessible underground corridors. Water, electricity, gas, communications, all organized inside a dedicated space. Instead of repeatedly destroying the surface, workers can reach the infrastructure from below. The road stays open. The city keeps moving. And that is one of the biggest ideas behind China's growing underground network. Move the infrastructure underground, so the city above can keep functioning. Asterisk. But pipes are only the beginning, because China is also moving something much larger underground. Entire roads, and entire railways. And when that happens, the underground stops looking like a utility network, starts looking like a second transportation system. Hidden one. And that is where the story really begins. Imagine driving through a major Chinese city. You are surrounded by buildings, traffic, pedestrians, intersections, and suddenly, The highway disappears beneath the ground. No massive elevated structure. No giant road cutting through the neighborhood. Just an entrance. And darkness. China has increasingly turned to underground highways as cities become denser. One of the clearest examples is Beijing's East 6th Ring Road reconstruction. The project placed roughly 7.4 kilometers of the highway underground, creating one of the country's major shield-board highway tunnels. Above the tunnel, the city can continue functioning. Below it, traffic moves through a completely different environment. This is the basic advantage of underground transportation. You don't have to destroy the city to expand the transportation network. You can build another layer underneath it. But building a highway underground is very different from building one across open land. The machine has to cut through the ground without causing dangerous movement at the surface. Engineers have to understand the geology. They have to manage groundwater. They have to protect nearby buildings. They have to monitor settlement. And they have to make sure the tunnel itself remains stable. Every meter is part of a much larger system. Then, there are railways. China is also pushing high-speed rail deeper into urban environments. In Guangzhou, engineers are constructing the Shillong Tunnel, a roughly 13.2-kilometer large-diameter railway tunnel beneath the urban area. The tunnel is part of the connection between Guangzhou Railway Station and Guangzhou South Railway Station, and is designed for trains traveling at up to 200 kilometers per hour. Think about what is happening. Above the tunnel, there may be roads, buildings, existing infrastructure, millions of people, and beneath them, a railway is being constructed. The people above may never know exactly where the machine is. They simply continue living their lives. That is one of the strangest things about underground construction. The larger the project becomes, the less visible it can be. Asterisk asterisk. A bridge announces itself. A skyscraper announces itself. A dam announces itself. But a tunnel can become one of the largest pieces of infrastructure in a city. While the surface looks almost completely normal, and modern tunnel boring machines make that possible. These machines can be hundreds of meters long. At the front is a rotating cutter head. It breaks the ground. Material is transported away. Behind the cutter head, the tunnel structure is assembled section by section. The machine moves forward. The tunnel grows. And the city above keeps moving. But eventually, the tunnel needs somewhere to go. A railway needs a station. Highway needs an interchange. Subway needs connections. And that creates another challenge. Underground space has to be organized. Imagine going below a major transportation hub. The first level might contain pedestrians. Another level could contain a subway. Another could contain a railway. Another could contain utilities. And somewhere beneath all of them, drainage and other infrastructure. The city becomes a vertical system. Instead of everything competing for the same surface space, different functions occupy different layers. This is exactly why underground planning is becoming more important. But transportation isn't the only thing China is pushing underground. There is another layer that most people never notice. The infrastructure that keeps everything else alive. Water, power, communications, drainage, sewage, and increasingly, shared utility tunnels. China has already developed thousands of kilometers of integrated utility corridors. These tunnels allow multiple infrastructure systems to occupy the same underground space. And they can make maintenance easier. Instead of digging through a busy street every time a utility needs attention, workers can access the system from inside the tunnel. It's not glamorous. You won't see tourists taking pictures of it. But this invisible infrastructure may be just as important as the highways above it. Because a city doesn't survive on roads and skyscrapers alone. It survives on the systems underneath them. And China is building those systems at a scale that is difficult to see from the surface. But there is one place where underground construction becomes even more extreme. Because some Chinese engineers aren't going a few meters underground. Or a few hundred. They're going kilometers down. Deep beneath Jinping Mountain in Sichuan, something remarkable is happening. Scientists are working inside the China Jinping Underground Laboratory. The laboratory sits beneath approximately 2,400 meters of rock. That is not simply deep. It is deeper than most people can easily imagine. More than 2 kilometers of mountain stand between the laboratory and the surface. But why would scientists deliberately put a laboratory that deep underground? Because sometimes, the Earth itself can be used as a shield. The surface of the planet is constantly being bombarded by cosmic radiation. For many experiments, that background noise is a problem. But thousands of meters of rock can block much of it. The deeper the laboratory, the quieter the environment becomes. And that makes it possible to search for extremely rare physical events, including possible clues about one of the biggest mysteries in modern physics: dark matter. Here, the underground isn't simply hiding infrastructure. It is creating an environment that cannot easily exist on the surface. And this reveals something important about China's underground development. There isn't one single purpose. Different layers serve different functions. Near the surface, utilities, little deeper, roads and railways, deeper still, specialized infrastructure, and in extreme cases, scientific facilities. But every time engineers go underground, they face the same enemy, the Earth itself. The ground may look solid, but underground, it is under pressure. Rock carries enormous weight. Groundwater can move through cracks. Different geological layers can behave completely differently. And when engineers remove material, the forces around the excavation change. That's why underground construction is fundamentally different from building on the surface. You aren't simply adding a structure. You're changing the environment around it. And the deeper you go, the more carefully that environment has to be controlled. Engineers use geological surveys, sensors, water pressure monitoring, structural measurements, ground settlement monitoring, and continuous data. Because once something is buried underground, you can't simply stand outside and inspect it. You need to know what is happening inside the Earth. This becomes even more complicated in cities. Imagine digging a new tunnel beneath a neighborhood. Above you are buildings. Below you might have another subway line. Beside you could be a gas pipeline. A few meters away, an electrical network. And somewhere beneath all of that, groundwater. Every system occupies the same three-dimensional space. A mistake doesn't simply affect the tunnel, can affect everything around it. That is why underground construction is as much about coordination as excavation. And this is one of the reasons China's current infrastructure plans place increasing emphasis on digital monitoring. The goal isn't simply to build underground systems. It is to know what condition they're in, where they are, how they're behaving, and when something needs attention. Because the underground world has one enormous disadvantage. You can't see it. Crack on a bridge can be visible. A damaged road can be obvious. But a problem inside an underground tunnel can remain hidden until it becomes serious. So the future underground city will need something more than concrete and steel. It will need sensors, data, monitoring, automation, and systems capable of telling engineers what is happening beneath the surface. And that's where the idea becomes much bigger than tunnels. Because once you connect transportation, utilities, energy, drainage, communications, and monitoring, the underground becomes a network. Not a collection of separate projects. A network. And China is now planning that network at the scale of entire cities. For centuries, cities expanded in one direction, outward. Then humans learned how to expand upward. Skyscrapers changed the skyline. No. Another direction is becoming increasingly important. Downward. China's underground development isn't about building one giant hidden city. Something more practical, and perhaps more important. It is about creating another layer of urban infrastructure. A layer beneath the city that carries the things the city needs to survive. Imagine the city from the side. The top. People live and work. Below. Roads and railway lines move people. Utility networks carry water, electricity, gas and communications. Further down. Specialized facilities can exist in environments impossible to create on the surface. And beneath all of it, the earth continues. The city becomes three-dimensional. And suddenly, a square kilometer of land isn't just one piece of space. Can contain multiple layers, multiple transportation systems, multiple infrastructure networks, multiple functions, without constantly expanding outward. That is the real reason China is investing so heavily underground. Not because underground cities sound futuristic, but because surface space is becoming more valuable. Every highway added to the surface takes space. Every railway takes space. Every utility network needs space. Every new development competes for the same limited land. Going underground doesn't eliminate the problem, but it creates another dimension. And China is already planning around it. Beijing's underground space strategy looks toward 2035 and divides underground development into organized depth zones. China's national infrastructure plans call for hundreds of thousands of kilometers of underground pipelines to be built or upgraded between 2026 and 2030. Major highways are being buried. High-speed rail is moving beneath cities. Utility networks are being consolidated into underground corridors. And some of the deepest scientific facilities on Earth are already operating beneath Chinese mountains. Each project has a different purpose. But together, they reveal a common direction. China is learning to build not only on the city, but beneath it. Asterisk. And this could change what a future city looks like. Not necessarily a city where people live hundreds of meters underground, but a city where the infrastructure is increasingly separated into layers, where the surface can be designed for people, while transportation and utilities move below, where highways can disappear beneath neighborhoods, where trains can travel through tunnels without dividing the city above, where maintenance crews can reach utilities without destroying the road, and where deeper underground spaces can be used for specialized purposes. The most remarkable part is that you may never notice any of it. You could drive across the city without realizing there is a highway beneath you. You could walk through a neighborhood without knowing a railway is passing below. You could turn on a light without thinking about the kilometers of cables beneath the street. You could drink water without ever seeing the system that delivered it. And that's what successful infrastructure does. Disappears. The more effectively it works, the less you notice it. That is why the phrase, "a world underground," is so interesting. Not because China is building a secret civilization beneath the surface, but because an enormous part of modern life is already moving underground. And that hidden world is getting larger, more connected, more organized, and more important. So the next time you stand in the middle of a Chinese city, look around. Look at the towers. Look at the roads. Look at the trains. Look at the people. Everything you can see is only one layer. Beneath it, there may be kilometers of tunnels, pipelines, railways, highways, cables, drainage systems, and infrastructure carrying the invisible machinery of modern life. The city you see is only the surface. The real city goes much deeper. And China isn't building a second world underground. It's building something more practical. A second layer of the world we already live in. A hidden layer, beneath our feet. And the deeper China builds, the less of its future may be visible from the surface. Asterisk. This is world unseen. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary world is the one you never see. Asterisk asterisk.